The massive space station Kepler Prime floated in the neutral zone between star systems, its silver walls gleaming under the light of distant suns. Inside the main assembly hall, hundreds of beings from across the galaxy had gathered for the most important trade meeting of the year. The air hummed with translators working overtime as dozens of different languages filled the chamber. Ben Torres adjusted his simple blue uniform and checked his data pad one final time. At 52 years old, he had served as Earth's chief diplomat for over a decade. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his brown eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had spent years negotiating with alien species. Today was different though. Today, humanity would formally request membership in the Galactic Trade Council. Around him, the assembly hall buzzed with activity. The Corvan delegation, tall insect-like beings with multiple arms, clicked their mandibles in what Ben had learned was polite conversation. Near the front, the aquatic Delaney floated in their mobile water tanks, their tentacles gesturing gracefully as they spoke through bioacoustic translators. Representatives from the Thex Empire, stocky beings covered in gray fur, sat in their designated section reviewing trade agreements on holographic displays. But it was the Velthari delegation that commanded the most attention. Their leader, Ambassador Zara Velkane, stood at the center of their group like a living crystal sculpture. The Velthari were known throughout the galaxy for their beauty and their wealth. Zara's translucent skin caught the light from the chamber's ceiling, creating rainbow patterns that shifted with her movements. Her silver hair flowed down her back like liquid metal, and her violet eyes held an intelligence that had made her one of the most powerful diplomats in known space. The Velthari Empire controlled over 200 star systems and commanded the largest merchant fleet in the galaxy. Their technology was considered the most advanced, their ships the fastest, and their weapons the most powerful. When Zara spoke, other species listened. "The assembly will now come to order," announced the council speaker, an ancient being from the Wix collective whose multiple voices echoed through the hall. "Today we consider the application of the human species for trade partnership status." Ben stood and walked to the central podium. The hall grew quiet as hundreds of alien eyes focused on him. He could feel the weight of their attention, the curiosity and skepticism that followed humanity wherever they went in the galaxy. "Honored delegates," Ben began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "I stand before you today representing the people of Earth and our growing colonies throughout human space. We come seeking partnership, friendship, and the chance to contribute to the prosperity that has made the Galactic Trade Council a beacon of cooperation throughout the stars." He activated his holographic display, showing images of Earth's blue oceans and green continents. "Humanity may be new to interstellar travel, but we are not new to trade, diplomacy, and cooperation. For thousands of years, our species has built civilizations, created art, and solved problems through working together." The display shifted to show human achievements, cities that reached into the clouds, medical advances that had eliminated diseases, and the first human colony ships launching toward distant worlds. "We offer our creativity, our determination, and our fresh perspective to this ancient alliance." Ben noticed some delegates leaning forward with interest, particularly the younger species who had joined the council in recent decades. But he also saw others exchanging glances that seemed less encouraging. The Corvan delegation's clicking had taken on a sharper tone, and several Thex representatives were shaking their heads. "We understand that membership in the council is not given lightly," Ben continued. "We are prepared to undergo any evaluation process, meet any requirements, and prove our worth as partners in building a better galaxy for all species." He stepped back from the podium and waited for questions. The chamber remained quiet for a long moment before the speaker indicated that Ambassador Zara wished to address the assembly. Zara rose from her seat with fluid grace and walked to the speaker's platform. Her footsteps made no sound on the metal floor, and the light seemed to bend around her crystalline form. When she reached the podium, she turned to face not Ben, but the assembled delegates. "Fellow council members," her voice was like music, each word perfectly pronounced and carrying an authority that came from centuries of diplomatic success. "We gather today to consider a most unusual request. The human species, barely a century into their industrial age when we first encountered them, now seeks to join our ancient alliance. She gestured toward Ben with one elegant hand. Let us examine what humanity offers. They achieved faster-than-light travel only 12 years ago. Their longest space journey before that barely reached their own planetary moon. They have colonized exactly 4 worlds, all within a few light-years of their homeworld. Several delegates nodded in agreement. The Delaney representative's tentacles swayed in what Ben recognized as a gesture of skepticism. But perhaps, Zara continued, we should look beyond their technological limitations to their character as a species. Her violet eyes found Ben's face, and he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. Humanity remains divided into competing nations on their homeworld. They have never achieved planetary unity, something most species accomplish before they discover fire. Their history is filled with wars, conflicts, and environmental destruction. Even now, as they spread to other worlds, they carry these divisions with them. Ben felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his expression neutral. Everything Zara said was technically true, though it ignored the progress humanity had made in recent decades. Their technology is crude, Zara went on, warming to her subject. Their ships require massive fuel reserves for journeys that our vessels complete in a fraction of the time. Their computers are barely capable of the calculations needed for simple interstellar navigation. Their weapons are laughably primitive. The Thex delegation was now nodding enthusiastically, and Ben heard approving chittering from the Corvin section. But technology can be learned, Zara said, her voice taking on a sharper edge. What concerns me more is their fundamental nature as a species. Humans are impulsive, emotional, and unpredictable. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. They form attachments to ideas and individuals that cloud their judgment. She turned to face Ben directly now, and her smile was cold as starlight. These primitives barely understand the civilizations they seek to join. They know nothing of our histories, our traditions, or our achievements. Their planet still suffers from resource conflicts and political divisions that more advanced species resolved millennia ago. The chamber was completely silent now. Ben could feel the attention of every delegate focused on him, waiting to see how he would respond to this systematic dismantling of humanity's application. What, Zara asked, her voice rising to fill the vast chamber, could such a backward species possibly offer to the galaxy? What wisdom could they share with civilizations that have thrived among the stars since before their species learned to make fire? What innovations could they provide that we have not already perfected? The silence stretched for several heartbeats before the chamber erupted. The Corvin delegation's clicking became a roar of approval. The Thex representatives began stamping their feet in rhythm, a sign of agreement in their culture. Even some of the younger species that had seemed interested in humanity's presentation were now nodding along with Zara's assessment. Ben stood at the podium, watching as species after species voiced their agreement with the Velthari ambassador. He could see in their faces and gestures the conviction that humanity was indeed too young, too primitive, too chaotic to deserve a place among the stars' great civilizations. The speaker called for order, and gradually the noise died down. Does the human representative wish to respond to these concerns? Ben looked out at the assembled delegates. He saw curiosity in some faces, dismissal in others, and in a few, something that might have been pity. Zara stood at her podium, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's lights as she waited for his response. Ben had spent months preparing for this moment. He had statistics about human achievements, examples of their innovations, and arguments about the value of diversity in any alliance. He had practiced responses to every possible objection, ready to defend his species against any criticism. Instead, he looked directly at Zara and said quietly, "We withdraw our application." The chamber fell silent so suddenly that Ben could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. Zara's confident expression faltered for just a moment, replaced by surprise. "We understand your position," Ben continued, his voice calm and steady despite the crushing disappointment he felt. "Humanity is not ready for membership in the Galactic Trade Council. We thank you for your time and consideration. He reached down and gathered his data pads, presentation materials, and formal documents. The chamber remained quiet as he packed everything into his diplomatic case with deliberate, unhurried movements. The speaker's multiple voices broke the silence. The human delegation may reconsider and reapply at any future date should circumstances change. Ben looked up from his case and nodded politely. Thank you for the opportunity. We wish the Council continued success in your endeavors. He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back at the assembled delegates one final time. Good day, he said simply, and walked out. Behind him, the chamber remained quiet for several more seconds before conversations began to resume. But the discussions were muted, as if Zara's decisive victory had left everyone unsure of what to say next. Within hours of Ben's departure, humanity's other diplomatic missions throughout the galaxy received coded messages. Trade negotiations were suspended. Cultural exchanges were cancelled. Research partnerships were quietly terminated. The human colonies that had been opening their borders to alien visitors suddenly became much more selective about who they allowed to land. By the end of the week, humanity had effectively withdrawn from all contact with the galactic community. Their representatives returned to human space, their embassies closed, and their communication channels went silent. The galaxy quickly moved on to other business. Humanity, it seemed, had taken the hint and retreated to lick their wounds. It was probably for the best, most agreed. The young species needed more time to mature before they could handle the complexities of interstellar politics. Ambassador Zara returned to her duties confident that she had saved the Council from a costly mistake. The humans would eventually realize their limitations and perhaps return in a few decades, properly humbled and ready to accept a minor role in galactic affairs. None of them imagined that humanity's silence would last 28 years, or that when it ended, everything would change. 5 years had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic society, and Ambassador Zara Velkane stood on the observation deck of her new flagship, watching cargo ships load precious metals bound for the Outer Rim territories. The Velthari Empire had grown significantly in those years, adding 12 new star systems to their trade network and establishing mining operations on 47 previously unclaimed worlds. Zara had been promoted to Senior Trade Chancellor after successfully negotiating the Corvin Expansion Treaty, which opened 3 major shipping routes through previously neutral space. Her crystalline features had sharpened with age and authority, and her violet eyes held the confidence of someone who had never lost a major diplomatic battle. Chancellor, her aide approached with a data tablet. The quarterly reports from the outer sectors have arrived. Zara accepted the tablet without taking her eyes off the cargo operations below. The numbers were impressive. Trade volume had increased by 37% since humanity's departure, and profit margins were at an all-time high. The Council had been right to reject the primitive species. Any word from the human territories, she asked, more out of curiosity than concern. Nothing, Chancellor. Their border systems remain closed to all traffic. Our long-range sensors detect normal stellar activity, but no ship movements or communication signals. Zara nodded. It had been the same report for 5 years. Humanity had apparently retreated to lick their wounds and was likely struggling with internal conflicts, as primitive species often did when faced with their own limitations. Schedule a meeting with the Thex delegation for tomorrow, she instructed. I want to finalize the mineral rights agreement before the Council session next week. As her aide departed, Zara returned her attention to the bustling spaceport outside her ship. The galaxy was thriving without humanity's chaotic presence. Trade flowed smoothly between civilized species, conflicts were resolved through established diplomatic channels, and progress continued at a measured, stable pace. 10 years after humanity's departure, the first strange reports began arriving at various monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. The Delaney Research Facility at Kepler 7 detected massive energy readings coming from the direction of human space, but the signals were unlike anything in their databases. Dr. Mirren Delaney, the station's chief scientist, floated in her water tank reviewing the data for the 100th time. The energy signatures were enormous, comparable to entire star systems, but they followed no known physics patterns. The reading suggested controlled fusion on a scale that should have been impossible, yet the signatures appeared and disappeared in perfect mathematical sequences. "Send a probe toward the human border," she instructed her assistant. "We need closer readings on these anomalies." The probe launched 3 days later, its advanced sensors calibrated to detect and analyze any unusual energy patterns. It traveled for 2 weeks toward the edge of human territory before encountering something that shouldn't have existed. The probe's final transmission showed a barrier of pure energy surrounding the entire human solar system. The barrier was perfectly spherical and appeared to be made of compressed spacetime itself. When the probe attempted to penetrate the barrier, it simply vanished, leaving no trace of its existence. Dr. Mirren immediately forwarded her findings to the Galactic Science Council, but the report was filed away as an unexplained anomaly. After all, the humans were a primitive species. Whatever they were doing in their isolated corner of space couldn't possibly affect the greater galaxy. 15 years after humanity's withdrawal, Captain Ven Korex of the merchant vessel Thunder Wing noticed that certain rare minerals were becoming increasingly difficult to find. Quantum crystals, which powered faster-than-light drives, had tripled in price over the past 3 years. Temporal stabilizers, essential for long-range communication, were nearly impossible to locate on the open market. "It makes no sense," he complained to his first officer as they searched through their third black market depot of the week. "These materials used to be common. Now every supplier tells the same story, their sources have dried up." His first officer, a young Thex named Grix, pulled up shipping records on his data pad. "Captain, look at this pattern. The shortages started with materials from the Helix Nebula region, then spread to the outer spiral territories, and now they're affecting core world suppliers." Ven studied the data and frowned. "That's not a natural pattern. Someone is systematically acquiring these materials from specific regions. But who would need that much quantum crystal? And why temporal stabilizers? Those are only used for the most advanced research projects." Ven had no answer, but he filed a report with the Merchants Guild anyway. Within weeks, similar reports poured in from across the galaxy. Rare earth elements, exotic matter, and advanced technology components were disappearing from the market in vast quantities. Investigation teams were dispatched to trace the supply chains, but they found something disturbing. In every case, the materials had been purchased by shell companies that led nowhere. The buyers paid in untraceable currency, provided no contact information, and vanished after completing their transactions. More unsettling were the reports from archaeological sites. Ancient ruins that had been studied for decades were being discovered stripped of specific artifacts. The thieves showed surgical precision, taking only items related to advanced physics, temporal mechanics, and space-time manipulation. They left behind priceless historical artifacts and cultural treasures, caring only for objects with scientific value. Security recordings from these sites showed nothing. Somehow, the thieves had acquired technology that could bypass every known detection system. 20 years after humanity's silence began, Zara stood in her private office aboard the massive space station that served as the Velthari Empire's mobile capital. She had been named Supreme Trade Chancellor 5 years earlier, commanding the largest commercial fleet in galactic history. Her empire now controlled trade routes spanning half the known galaxy. But something was wrong. "The communication disruptions are becoming more frequent," her chief technical advisor reported, his voice tight with concern. "Last week we lost contact with 7 mining operations simultaneously. The blackouts lasted exactly 47 minutes each time." Zara studied the incident reports on her holographic display. "System malfunctions. That's what we thought initially, Chancellor. But our best technicians have examined the affected systems. There's no evidence of equipment failure, sabotage, or external interference. The communication network simply stopped working, then resumed normal operation as if nothing had happened." Similar problems were affecting Velfari transportation systems. Their most advanced ships, equipped with the latest navigation computers, occasionally experienced mysterious course corrections. The ships would deviate from their planned routes for a few hours, then return to normal flight patterns. The navigation logs showed no record of these deviations. "Our engineers insist the ships never left their intended paths," Zara's fleet commander explained during their weekly briefing. "But traffic control confirms visual sightings of our vessels in locations they were never scheduled to visit." Zara felt a growing unease that she couldn't explain. Her empire was more powerful than ever, yet these small problems were multiplying. None of the incidents caused serious damage, but they followed patterns that suggested deliberate action rather than random failures. "Double our security protocols," she ordered. "I want every ship, every facility, and every communication channel monitored continuously." Her staff implemented the new measures immediately, deploying the most sophisticated detection equipment available. The monitoring systems found nothing. Whatever was causing the problems remained invisible to their technology. 25 years after humanity's disappearance, the barrier around human space suddenly expanded. Deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy detected the change as the energy field grew to encompass not just humanity's home system, but their 4 colony worlds as well. Dr. Mirren, now the galaxy's leading expert on unexplained phenomena, led a joint research mission to study the expanding barrier. Their fleet of 12 ships approached the human border with every scanner and sensor array known to galactic science. "The energy readings are off our instruments," her lead physicist reported. "This barrier is generating more power than our largest stellar power plants." As they drew closer, the ship's instruments began detecting something impossible. The barrier wasn't just energy, it was structured spacetime, folded and compressed in ways that violated fundamental physics. Within the barrier, they detected massive gravitational anomalies that suggested construction projects on an unimaginable scale. "There are artificial gravity wells inside the barrier," Dr. Mirren announced to her team. "Structures the size of planets, maybe larger. But how could a primitive species build something like this?" Before anyone could answer, their ship's communication systems activated without command. A simple message appeared on every screen simultaneously: "Research complete. Departure authorized." The fleet's engines engaged automatically, turning the ships away from the barrier and setting course for their home territories. None of the crew had touched any controls. When Dr. Mirren tried to override the navigation systems, her commands were ignored. The ships simply continued their retreat, carrying the confused research team back to Delaney space. The message had been sent in perfect Delaney, using grammatical structures and cultural references that would have taken decades of study to master. 27 years after humanity's withdrawal from galactic society, every major civilization was experiencing similar problems. Communication blackouts, navigation anomalies, and equipment malfunctions were reported from the core worlds to the outer rim. The incidents were never harmful, but they demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't have existed. In the Corvin hives, military commanders reported that their tactical computers occasionally displayed battle scenarios involving unknown ship designs. The scenarios ran for exactly 93 seconds before vanishing, leaving no trace in the computer memory. Thex mining operations discovered that their excavation equipment sometimes uncovered archaeological artifacts in locations where no previous civilizations had existed. The artifacts were always human-made objects from before their space age, simple tools, artworks, and writings that somehow predated the mining sites by millions of years. The Wix collective's distributed consciousness detected brief moments when additional minds joined their mental network. These foreign thoughts spoke in human languages and demonstrated knowledge of Wix culture and history that surpassed their own records. Zara stood in the Galactic Trade Council's emergency session chamber, facing representatives from every major civilization. The magnificent hall where she had once delivered her triumphant speech about humanity's limitations now felt smaller, darker, as delegates shared reports of the mysterious incidents affecting their territories. "The pattern is clear," announced the speaker with his multiple voices. "These phenomena began shortly after humanity isolated themselves, but they've intensified dramatically over the past 5 years. Coincidence, Zara stated firmly, though her voice lacked its usual confidence. Humanity is a primitive species. They lack the technology to affect events throughout the galaxy. The Delaney representative's tentacles swayed skeptically. Our latest intelligence suggests otherwise, Chancellor Zara. The barrier around human space demonstrates capabilities beyond our current understanding. Then where are they? Zara demanded. If humans possess such advanced technology, why remain hidden? Why not contact us directly? The chamber fell silent as delegates pondered this question. 27 years of strange incidents, impossible technology, and unexplained phenomena, yet humanity remained completely silent. Perhaps, suggested the young Corvin delegate, they are no longer the species we remember. His words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galaxy thought it knew about the primitive beings who had once asked for membership in their ancient alliance. Outside the station's viewports, space itself seemed to be waiting for an answer that would soon arrive. The morning shift at Kepler Prime Monitoring Station began like any other. Chief Operator LYX checked the overnight sensor logs while sipping her morning nutrition supplement. The displays showed normal stellar activity across all monitored sectors, with routine traffic moving along established shipping lanes. Then every alarm in the facility began screaming at once. What's happening? LYX shouted over the noise as her team rushed to their stations. The barrier around human space, her senior technician gasped, staring at his instruments in disbelief. It just vanished completely. LYX rushed to the main display screen and felt her breath catch in her throat. Where the mysterious energy barrier had surrounded human territory for 28 years, space now appeared completely normal. But that wasn't what made her hands shake as she reached for the emergency communication panel. Emerging from what had been empty space moments before, a fleet of ships unlike anything in galactic records was moving toward the station. The vessels defied every principle of known engineering. They moved without visible engines, their hulls seeming to bend light around them in impossible ways. Some ships appeared to be constructed from crystallized time itself, while others looked like they were made of compressed starlight. Send an emergency signal to all council members, LYX ordered, her voice barely steady. Tell them humanity has returned. 3 hours later, every available delegate had gathered in the main assembly hall of Kepler Prime. The chamber buzzed with nervous conversation in dozens of languages as representatives tried to make sense of what their sensors were detecting. The human fleet had stopped just outside the station's defensive perimeter, making no aggressive moves but clearly demonstrating capabilities that rendered all known weapons useless. Ambassador Zara Velkane stood near the front of the assembly, her crystalline features harder than they had been 28 years ago. Age had added sharp angles to her face, and her violet eyes held the cold authority of someone who had never learned to doubt her own judgment. As Supreme Trade Chancellor, she commanded more power than any single individual in galactic history. They're trying to intimidate us, she announced to the nearby delegates. Humanity hopes their mysterious technology will make us forget their primitive nature. We must not be swayed by theatrics. Her words sounded confident, but privately Zara felt something she had never experienced before, genuine uncertainty. The ships outside defied everything she understood about physics and engineering. How had a primitive species developed such technology in only 28 years? The chamber's main communication system activated without warning, displaying a simple message in every known galactic language: request permission to dock. Single representative. Peaceful intentions. The speaker's multiple voices called for order as delegates erupted in discussion. After 10 minutes of heated debate, permission was granted. One of the impossible human ships approached the station's main docking bay, its hull shimmering like liquid mercury as it settled into place without any visible landing mechanism. The airlock opened, and Ben Torres walked into the station. Zara stared at the human representative in shock. 28 years had passed since his humiliating departure from this very station, yet Ben appeared exactly as he had that day. His gray hair held the same pattern, his brown eyes showed no additional lines of age, and his simple blue uniform looked freshly pressed. He carried himself with the same calm dignity that had marked his previous visit, but something deeper had changed. There was a weight to his presence now, as if he carried the gravity of distant stars in his movements. "Honored delegates," Ben said as he entered the assembly hall, his voice carrying clearly without any amplification system. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien eyes focused on this representative of a species that had vanished for nearly 3 decades. Ben walked to the central podium with unhurried steps, his gaze moving across the assembled delegates before settling on Zara's face. 28 years ago, he began, his voice calm and measured, I stood in this chamber representing a young species seeking partnership with the galactic community. Ambassador Zara Velkane spoke for many when she explained why humanity was not ready for such an alliance. Ben activated a holographic display that showed not human technology, but images from across the galaxy. Pictures of Velthari mining operations, Corvin military exercises, Delaney research stations, and Thex commercial facilities appeared in sequence. "She told us we had nothing to offer," Ben continued. "You were wrong, but not in the way you think. We didn't offer technology or resources. We offered something far more valuable, partnership with a species that thinks in centuries, not cycles. Alliance with beings who see challenges as invitations to evolve." The display shifted to show star charts covering the entire galaxy. Red markers appeared at thousands of locations, indicating places where mysterious incidents had occurred over the past 2 decades. "We spent these years studying every species, every technology, every weakness in your galactic community," Ben explained. "We learned your languages not just from your public broadcasts, but from your private communications, your military codes, your diplomatic secrets. We mapped your territories not just from your star charts, but from direct observation of every world you control." Delegate after delegate stared at the display in growing alarm as they recognized classified information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. "We understood your fears by monitoring your psychological profiles, your cultural anxieties, your species-wide neuroses that drive your political decisions. We did this not for conquest, but for comprehension. Not for domination, but for dedication to your survival." Zara rose from her seat, her voice sharp with anger and confusion. "What are you claiming? That you've been spying on us for 28 years? Ben's expression remained calm as he looked at her directly. "Ambassador Zara, do you remember the communication blackouts your empire experienced 7 years ago? The navigation anomalies that affected your transport fleet? The equipment malfunctions that occurred exactly when your military was planning aggressive expansion into Corvin territory?" Zara's crystalline features went pale. Those incidents had been classified at the highest levels of Velthari security. No outside species should have known about them. "Those weren't malfunctions," Ben said quietly. "They were interventions. When your empire prepared to attack the Corvin hives over disputed mining rights, we disabled your communication networks to prevent the orders from reaching your fleet commanders. When your ships moved to establish military bases in neutral space, we altered their navigation systems to redirect them to harmless locations." The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates realized the implications. The mysterious incidents that had plagued their civilizations for decades hadn't been random system failures. They had been deliberate actions by an unseen guardian force. "The Delaney research accident that would have created a black hole in your home system," Ben continued, his voice cutting through the noise. "The Thex mining operation that was digging toward a planet-killing volcanic chamber. The Corvin bioweapon research that would have created an unstoppable plague. The Wix Collective's experiment with distributed consciousness that would have merged every mind in the galaxy into a single entity." With each example, Ben displayed detailed technical information that showed how human intervention had prevented galactic catastrophes. Equipment failures that had seemed like bad luck revealed themselves as precisely timed actions that had saved entire civilizations from their own mistakes. "You prevented these disasters," the Delaney representative whispered, her tentacles trembling. "How long have you been protecting us?" "Since the day we left this station," Ben replied. We realized that a galaxy full of ancient civilizations had grown complacent, taking risks without considering consequences. You needed guardians, watchers who could act when your own wisdom failed you. Zara struggled to maintain her composure as the full scope of human activities became clear. You had no right to interfere with sovereign governments. Our internal affairs are none of your concern. Your internal affairs stopped being internal when they threatened galactic stability, Ben responded. The Velthari expansion plans would have triggered a war involving 47 star systems and billions of lives. The Corvin bioweapons would have spread beyond your control within months. The Delaney black hole experiment would have consumed half the core worlds. The display changed again, showing technological schematics that made delegates gasp in recognition and amazement. These were solutions to problems that had plagued galactic civilization for millennia: clean energy generation that could power entire star systems, medical technology that could extend life indefinitely, transportation methods that could cross the galaxy in hours rather than months. We return now not as the primitives who left in shame, Ben announced, but as the guardians you never knew you needed. The question isn't what we can offer you anymore. The question is whether you're ready to accept what we've already given. He gestured to the technological displays around him. Everything you see here is already yours. The energy crisis affecting the Outer Rim territories. We solved it 6 years ago and have been quietly implementing the solution through shell companies and anonymous donors. The medical plague threatening the Thex homeworld. We developed the cure and distributed it through your own research institutions, letting your scientists take credit for the breakthrough. Ben's voice grew warmer as he continued. The gravitational anomalies that were destabilizing shipping lanes. We've been maintaining space-time stability in those regions for over a decade. The asteroid impacts that threatened 12 different worlds. We redirected those objects so gradually that your astronomers never detected the interventions. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full truth became clear. For 28 years, while the galaxy had forgotten about humanity had been quietly solving every major crisis, preventing every potential catastrophe, and ensuring the survival and prosperity of species that had rejected them. Why? Zara asked, her voice barely audible. Why help civilizations that dismissed you as primitive? Why protect people who showed you no respect? Ben smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, and his expression held genuine warmth. Because that's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. We solve problems that seem impossible. We care for strangers as if they were family. You called us primitive, chaotic, and unpredictable. You were right about the unpredictable part. He looked around the assembly hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from every major species. No one predicted that the primitives you rejected would become the guardians keeping your civilizations alive. No one expected that the chaotic humans would become the stabilizing force maintaining galactic peace. Ben stepped back from the podium and clasped his hands behind his back. We offer now what we offered 28 years ago: partnership. The difference is that now you understand what that partnership truly means. We're not asking to join your community anymore. We're inviting you to join ours. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the station's life support systems. In that moment, every delegate understood that everything had changed, and nothing would ever be the same.